everybody. My name is Lelia Lawson from Davey Textile Solutions. We are not in the bioeconomy business yet. We manufacture high visibility striping, but our goal is to be within the next few years. So I'm going to talk to you about two things that haven't been discussed in this conference. First, that's going to be utilization of industrial hemp as a potential feedstock for the bioeconomy. And secondly, the Canadian textile industry, which just to see how we can actually leverage and contribute to the bioeconomy as well. So before I get into that part of the presentation, I want to talk to you a little bit about the environmental impacts of fiber production. So globally, there's over 100 million tons of textiles produced on an annual basis. We love textiles. We're enshrouded by them, we're surrounded by them, and 54% of these textiles are polyester, and that is a hydrocarbon-derived polymer. 22% is cotton, which is a cellulose, not a lignocellulosic, but it is a cellulose fiber. And they are very energy and resource intense to produce. The textile industry is not very sustainable, or it's not very known to be sustainable in the industry. So as an example, it takes approximately 2,700 liters to produce one cotton t-shirt. Not great. But on the other side of things, as consumers, we're not that great either. There was a really interesting study from the University of Guelph that suggested that Canadian consumers landfill 500,000 tons of textiles a year. So everybody in this room is currently throwing out 12 kilograms of textiles every single year, and that's increasing on a global scale by about 3% every year as well. So very interesting. But there's another interesting phenomenon that's actually occurring in the world, and that's called the cellulose gap. So as our population increases, you saw in the previous slide, 22% cotton. We love to consume cotton. However, there's only so much arable land available in the world to grow cotton, and it's actually starting to decrease due to climate change, due to other situations. If you want to read a really good case study, read about the Aral Sea and how we decimated that, the fourth largest inland lake, to basically puddles of water due to irrigation. So it's really quite an interesting case study. But so we're capped at about 26 million tons of fiber production for cotton, but as the population increases, we need that cotton. So how do we fill that gap? Well, the answer is man-made cellulosic fibers, and I'm going to get into a little bit more detail describing what that's all about shortly. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit again about that global fiber production, where I said it was more than 100 million tons per year, of which there is 28% plant fiber derived, of which 22% is cotton, but there's also 6% in that other category. And that other category primarily comprises of those lignocellulosic materials like flax and hemp and kenaf and jute. Now, if we want to talk about man-made cellulosic fibers, this comprises two main fibers that I want to talk about. One being viscose rayon. Again, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail in terms of what these are. And the second one being lyocell. So if you look at those numbers, viscose is about 5% in the world right now, and lyocell is about 0.3%. But I'm going to suggest that those numbers are going to flip, and lyocell production is going to skyrocket here very shortly. And again, as that cellulose gap increases, we're going to need more man-made cellulosic fibers being produced. But before I actually talk a little bit more about man-made cellulosic fibers, I want to ask the question, why do we not wear hemp? Well, it's a cannabis plant, and there's a little bit of stigma associated with cannabis. This is a picture of my brother in a research plot in the mid-90s in an Alberta hemp farm. And this is my mom's taking a picture, right? And there's security cameras everywhere else because it's industrial hemp. It's not legalized yet. It was actually legalized to start producing it from an agricultural crop in 1998. So this is before then. Anyway, so mom's taking a picture, and on one of the cameras, a voice comes over and says, "Please put the camera away, get back in your vehicle, and leave the premises, otherwise I'm gonna have to send the cops." This is kind of the stigma associated with hemp, a plant that's been around for millennia. So that's one reason. Now, in 2018, the Canadian Cannabis Act did deregulate hemp production a little bit, but it's still regulated under, get this, Health Canada. It's not regulated under Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So it's still, there's so many regulations around growing hemp, and this is why we don't see hemp in our lives. Now, secondly, why don't we grow hemp? Well, there's 87 cultivars that are approved to grow in Canada, and they're all essentially dual-purpose plants. I'm probably the only person in this building right now. I'm wearing a hemp dress. So I'm the only person wearing hemp probably in this room and in the building. Now, this hemp, I can guarantee you, did not come from Canada. It came from either China, Indonesia, or India, the three places that are producing a lot of hemp. Now, if you look at the Canadian hemp that we grow, dual-purpose plant, we're either growing it for nutraceuticals, which is for your CBD oil, or for seed, which is for oil for food or for protein. Now, if you take a nutraceutical plant, it's a very young plant, and that hemp fiber hasn't been produced. If you look at this stalk, so you have the middle of a hemp stalk is called a hurd, and that's the woody component. And what you use for the textile component is called the bast fiber. So that nutraceutical plant is really young, not really good for textile applications. And then you have the seed plant that grows really, really tall, but it's really lignocellulosic rich. So it's got a lot of lignocellulose in it. So you can't really utilize that for textile production either. So what's the solution here for Canada and the textile industry? Well, the answer is man-made cellulosic fibers. So what are man-made cellulosic fibers? So you take a natural cellulose, which right now is typically beech and eucalyptus trees or grasses such as bamboo. So if you have any clothing that is labeled as being bamboo, that is going to be a man-made cellulosic fiber. So you take this wood, they pulp it, so wood and paper industry, they pulp it using either acid sulfide or a PHK pulp, and then you extrude it into a fiber, make it into a yarn, make it into a fabric. And what's interesting about cellulosics, I'm going to go back to that whole landfill situation where we're throwing out 12 kilograms of clothes a year, is these fibers are actually biodegradable. So that is lending towards a circular economy. Now, what's the difference between viscose and lyocell? I'm going to tell you why I predict that lyocell is going to take over the world here pretty soon. If we look at this process, there's a lot going on in here. So it's quite the process to make viscose fiber. But what I want you to focus on is this lovely area right over here, carbon disulfide. So what you're doing is you're taking this natural cellulose and you're derivatizing it into a xanthate using carbon disulfide. Carbon disulfide itself is really environmentally damaging. It also has been known to cause neurological disorders in the individuals working in these facilities. So in other words, it's horribly toxic. It's a very regulated chemical, and viscose production is really only, largest producers are now China and India. So we don't see it a lot in, well, there's no production in Canada and a little bit in the US, but again, it's very highly regulated. So if you look at the lyocell process, it is using a chemical solvent called N-methylmorpholine N-oxide. Doesn't sound that great, but what's really wonderful about this process is that solvent, it dissolves the cellulosic pulp, and it doesn't derivatize it, so it remains cellulose. And then it is actually 100% recoverable. Well, maybe 99.9% recoverable through this process. So this is an extremely environmentally friendly process compared to the viscose process. The problem is viscose has been around for over 100 years. Lyocell was commercialized in the mid-90s. So it's still out of the price range in terms of viscose versus lyocell, but I think that due to regulations with carbon disulfide, we are going to see more lyocell production happening. Now, in terms of the objective is to make lyocell from hemp. So I'm going to here's another picture of my brother. He's standing in a crop this last August in another Alberta hemp crop. No cameras this time, which was really great. So what's great about hemp? Well, it's a wonderful feedstock. It's a wonderful biomass product. It actually grows on average about 10 centimeters a day during the average growth period in July and August. So it grows super, super tall. So just imagine the feedstock available in hemp. And it's all stock. That's all that lignocellulosic material. So we could take that, and it's essentially very similar to wood product when you pulp it and you look at the actual alpha cellulose, hemicellulose, you look at your lignins in it and your ash content, your inorganics. So it's very similar to wood pulp in that regard. So we could take that as an alternative feedstock to wood and the grasses like bamboo, and we can make products like dental floss. So dental floss right now, it goes into a landfill, it doesn't biodegrade. So we can make a biodegradable dental floss. We can make non-wovens. We can make consumer products, even something like food casings and other food products for like sausage casings, absorbent materials, and finally the world that I'm in is protective apparel. So our plans are to actually incorporate lyocell from hemp into our high visibility safety apparel striping. So Canadian bioeconomy. Right now, as a textile manufacturer, we are completely reliant on other sources of fiber. There's really no sources of fiber here in Canada. There's a little bit of wool, a little bit of flax, but nothing else. So we're completely reliant on imports. And when you rely on imports, you have no traceability of where your product is coming. Yeah, you could say that I'm sustainable, I'm using cotton because it's more environmentally friendly, or you can make up a story, but it's a little bit of greenwashing happening. But when you can actually have a made in Canada product, you can now have complete traceability of that product. And we have that dual purpose plant, now we have whole plant utilization. So again, going back to that whole circularity initiative, whole plant utilization. Going back to made in Canada, bioeconomy, it's all about money, right? So where we are currently in the research is we are at lab scale producing this fiber, and we are looking at pilot scale. Probably we're looking at purchasing the equipment and getting in place by the end of 2024 with a scale up to about 1,000 tons per year by the end of 2025. And I know what you're thinking, here's another new company coming on the block and they're gonna hit that valley of death, right? Well, what's different about this whole initiative is lyocell is not a new idea. It's been in the industry, it's commercialized, it's a viable it's a viable product. The only thing that we're looking here is looking at an alternative feedstock towards this initiative. So that's why we're saying it is a very viable product. But not only that, we have support throughout industry. We have financial support, we have support with feedstock supply, and we have support all the way to the end user. So we have a lot of interest in this topic. Now, I just wanted to end my presentation by saying three things. So I want to say, first of all, yeah, the future is definitely now. The future is definitely circular, but the future is hemp. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lelia. And I've got a question here from the audience about should hemp be positioned as a carbon sink, and could it be part of a sustainability strategy under Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada? And we have an ADM from AAFC right here in the audience. So there's a question for you.
Okay, so yes, it's such a fast-growing plant. It is really good at carbon sequestration. So absolutely, I could definitely see potential there. In terms of greenhouse gases, no, because we are utilizing this in a product that's not going to be out in the market for over 50 to 100 years, but carbon sequestration, absolutely.
Well, you mentioned that you hope to be more active in this space in the next 2 years, so hopefully then when we have our conference in 2024-25, most of us can be wearing hemp.
I really hope so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.